Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube Astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about astrology, the coronavirus, and suicide. Now, thing about this is what inspired me to do this on a sad note, though, is that some of you may have heard of a doctor, a fairly prominent doctor. She was like our emergency room doctor in New York. Her name is Lorna Breen, and she died sadly of suicide. I believe it was on Sunday, where apparently she became very despondent over the fact that she wasn't able to really do more in terms of helping the people with the coronavirus, whether it may have been saving lives or what have you. You may want to look that up, confirm what the real, as far as precisely or her reason for doing it. It's something we may not really know. If there was no, depending on what comes out in the details, if there's a suicide note or what have you, it might be something we might not ever know the precise reason for it. But it was believed, my understanding, and very well it's something to do with having difficulty in doing more for the people that had the coronavirus. And she had corona. She actually contracted it, sadly. The thing about this is that the coronavirus, what people have to realize is that people have perished due to the coronavirus because they succumbed to the symptoms of it. But now what I'm thinking of now, as far as a new element or aspect connected with this, that a lot of people may not have really thought about or talked about much, but is that there's other reasons now where people may die indirectly as a result of the coronavirus, given that, you look at Lorna Breen, sadly, as somebody that died, even though, she had the coronavirus, but she didn't die from it. But what happens is, because due likely to the fact she wasn't able to do much for other people she wanted to, she got out of it, becoming despondent over this situation. So the thing about it is, when you look at suicide in astrology, you're looking at the 12th house is the house of suicide. The 8th house is the house of death, of course, and it doesn't mean somebody can have some negative malefic transits there. They may be a little bit more susceptible to suicide, even though the 8th house is not the house of suicide. It is still the house of death. Remember, the 4th house is the house of the end of life, the latter part of life and end of life. So, and also you look at Neptune. Planet Neptune is the planet associated with it, but those are elements that you could strongly look at in terms of suicide and astrology. But when you're talking about the coronavirus, Neptune is the planet associated with the suicide, but you have to remember that Neptune is also, sadly, the planet that is connected strongly, or one of the two planets connected strongly with disease. Well, Neptune is really about disease. You have Neptune transiting Pisces right now, and that could be and that could manifest in diseases that can't be eradicated, because remember, Neptune is associated with diseases. Pisces can be about diseases that are incurable or can't be obliterated or eradicated. Pluto also is connected with this, because Pluto is about viruses. But the thing about it is, if somebody's having one strong indicator, I think, is that people have to be careful. If you have transit Neptune hitting one's 12th house, sadly could be an indicator. It doesn't mean the person will commit suicide, but I'm talking about as far as a greater propensity for it. If it's due to the fact that if you have transit Neptune hitting your 12th house at this time, especially now when you're talking about the coronavirus situation, the suicide can increase in terms of it being attributed to the coronavirus, because Neptune is associated with diseases. Neptune and Pisces can be about, again, again, diseases, one can't be eradicated, you have it hitting the 12th house of suicide, then it can increase that energy, that propensity or proclivity for that. And if it's hitting your ascendant, say you have a Pisces ascendant, and that transit's not only in the 12th house, but it's hitting your ascendant as well, then you're talking about you're also talking about issues with the physical body. It could increase that propensity or whatever you to actually contract it, and also it may increase some suicidal tendencies as far as that goes. Now, with going back to Dr. Lorna Breen, I thought was said, you have to remember there's other indicators in the chart for this. You have to also remember there's also Arabic parts of suicide that you have to consider. A lot of people may not think they're significant, but when a short time ago, I had gone on to, I looked at the chart on the chart I made on Astro.com. I told you about the improvised solar sunrise chart that I did for Lorna Breen, and when I calculated the Arabic parts of suicide based on those positions, the solar sunrise chart positions, she had her there were two parts of suicide. One part of suicide was an Aries conjunct her natal Chiron, and of course Chiron can be about physical wounds. She had Chiron retrograde as well, and so that's an indicator of suicide, and also strong wounds that can be associated with it. I really hope there wasn't a gun. It makes me wonder if there may have been a gunshot wound that she succumbed to, because remember, Chiron is associated. Chiron can be associated with physical wounds. Aries is the head and the face. The other part of suicide she had was like less than 2 degrees, I believe, from her natal Pluto, in the 12th house in the solar sunrise chart, the 12th house of suicide. And having Pluto in the 12th house by itself can be an indicator of death from suicide. Then you have one part of suicide, very close proximity to Pluto. That could be an indicator of death by suicide. And the thing about this is, the fact that Pluto is by it may indicate there might be a little bit more of a mystery to this, and we may not ever know the full details regarding this. And Pluto, of course, being in Virgo, the sign of details. Now, a thing about this too is, if somebody's having a transit, also I talked about transit Neptune hitting one's 12th house. Remember, the 4th house is the end of life, that latter part of life. Somebody having transit Neptune hitting the 4th house can at times, manifest in the death, the end of life being attributed to a disease one can't eradicate, or it can be through suicide, being and of course that planet being associated with being Neptune. Now, if somebody's having, say, transit Neptune making an adverse aspect, say, to their natal Mercury, or even if it's conjunct one's natal Mercury, that could be an increased energy propensity for thoughts that can be connected, that could be suicidal. So it's really, it's important. There's a lot of things, obviously, to look at as far as this goes. Now, if you have transit Pluto hitting your 12th house, Pluto is about viruses, so it can be, in some cases, manifest in suicide attributed to a virus, whether it was because one contracted it, or it's an indirect result, like what happened, sadly, what it seems like with that prominent doctor I spoke about, Lorna Breen. So those are, sadly, and what people have to really keep in mind of is that these indirect reasons attributed to the coronavirus, why people can die as well, that it's not just about having a physical situation take place. It's not just potentially perilous due to the fact that due to contracting it. A lot of it can also be about other things that happen as a result of this, such as confinement, um, isolation, too much solitude, the fact that we have all these restrictions and stipulations going on right now, and having to stay inside, sadly, more because of this situation, which could lead to depression. If you have elements in your chart for depression and despondency, that could be, I mean, when you have that those people can be more inclined to suicide than many others. I mean, such as Saturn in the 12th house. I have Saturn in the 12th house conjunct my ascendant. This could be about dealing with a lot of despondent energy and solitude and seclusion. For other people, there may be some other people that have Saturn in the 12th house may manifest in a different way. Could manifest in actually having a mental illness. That is depression, because the 12th house is the house of mental illness, and Saturn is that sad, depressive planet. Very negative, pessimistic planet. And it's also, and there's other things too. I mean, one could look at as well. I mean, there can be aspects, say if you have aspects in your chart that indicate that you're not overly happy with yourself. I mean, somebody say that has, they have their, in their natal chart, they have Venus making an adverse aspect to their ascendant. This could be the kind of person that might be unhappy with their physical appearance. Say if their ascendant is in Virgo, they might not ever think they look meticulously dressed enough or neat enough, healthy enough. They might, it could be, I mean, Virgo energy can be about perfection. And you say, if you have another example, is that, I mean, let's say somebody has Venus making an adverse aspect to their, let's say it's to their Gemini ascendant. Maybe the person might think they're not youthful enough or slim enough, or in their appearance. It could be, or they just don't have, or they don't look cerebral. And if somebody that has the ascendant at 29 degrees, I mean, you're talking about 29 degrees, the critical degree. 29 degrees, it can be the crisis degree in astrology, and it can be, if you have that on your ascendant, you could be somebody that may not really ever think that your appearance, you might not ever be satisfied with your particular appearance. Somebody say has their ascendant at 29 degrees Sagittarius, they might not ever think they look athletic or sporty enough for others. I mean, this is or they might never think they come across as jovial or jocular enough to others, as positive. When you have elements like this, it can give greater propensity for suicide, at least a little bit, because if you have dissatisfaction with yourself, then what it could mean is that you have a greater tendency to think that you don't belong. And I just want to let people know this. I'm not trying to be overly pessimistic or negative. And you're dealing with the coronavirus situation right now, on top of that, which obviously will not help matters. I mean, that woman, Lorna Breen, she had a Saturn in the improvised the solar sunrise chart. She had Saturn in Taurus in the 8th house of death. And Saturn in Taurus in a negative manifestation can be about maybe restrictions or sadness in connection with self-worth and self-esteem. It was in her 8th house of death. There might have been indicated she might have felt she just was running out of self-esteem. She might have been running out of self-esteem and self-worth, sadly. And the thing is, I mean, there's a lot of things to look at. in one's chart as far as possible indicators of death by suicide, and the fact you're dealing with the coronavirus may exacerbate this that tendency, that potential toward that. If somebody, say, has the ruler of their 8th house in the 12th house in their natal chart, that could be a death that may be by suicide, or it can be one that may be connected with might be something where the ending, the suicide, 12th house of suicide, where the ending may take place due to a virus related situation, because the 8th house is the house of viruses. Now, those are some things to look at, and of course I could go on, and there are so many things to look at in terms of astrology, natal placements and transits, as to indicators as to perhaps where one may kill themselves due to this coronavirus. Whether those are because remember, the coronavirus can be potentially perilous, but it's not just about where it's not always just about where it's physically killing people. It's because even people that don't have it, I think there's certain indirect reasons to the coronavirus where people may die because they're becoming despondent, they're feeling melancholy as a result of the restrictions and due to the coronavirus pandemic that is going on right now, especially sadly people that might be very gregarious and extroverted, and they have charts that indicate that, and that are forced to live a more restricted existence at this point in time. So it is something to look at and consider, people. And I just want to let people know out there, if you're doing hold on a moment, people. I want to say, close with, if you know anybody that might be showing some suicidal tendencies, or they're even talking about suicide in a way where they thought of doing themselves in or contemplated it, don't hesitate to reach out and help them. And even if it's a matter of calling some number or some hotline at this point in time, because this coronavirus, sadly, I believe will be causing more people as time progresses. It will be causing people to commit suicide, and whether it's due to them actually contracting the coronavirus, or it's because of situations that they're put in their life due to the fact that there is a coronavirus epidemic going on. And those are basically what that's what I wanted to get at this time. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.